cannot see him, but I'm assuming he's here. I hope he's here. Folks. Avi, are you here? He was here before. He might be in the lobby. Avi Nesher will be joining us in just a moment, so stay with us as he makes his way in. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Avi Nesher.
Mr. Isaac.
Thank you for being here. Welcome back.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing this film with us. We have a short time for Q&A for this one.
Okay.
But tell us a little bit, we heard a little bit about why you wanted to make this film. But my two big questions are, where did it really begin for you? What was the core of the story? Excuse me. And why do you think it became such a phenomenon in Israel?
Well, it really does go back to my dad. It's really bizarre passing by this funeral home on the way here. You know, it's a strange thing. At my father's funeral here in New York, I did not cry. And 2-3 years later, I was making this movie. Remember the scene where the mother gets buried? Yes, I got choked up and I couldn't say cut. You know, so suddenly, you know, I had a really delayed reaction. And this is where this movie came from. I was looking for a story to tell the story of his generation, you know, who came to Israel, never quite to have a full life. You know, so the children, you know, like the two girls at the end will go on, you know, to be the one who tell the stories. And I was just looking for a story because if I was to tell my own story, it would be interesting enough. And somebody told me that there was a cricket league in the Negev. And I thought it was ludicrous. You know, I mean, God knows what are the rules of this strange game. To this day, I do not know. But the idea of people having a cricket league in the Negev just seemed to me the ultimate metaphor of people trying to embrace some former colonial identity in order, you know, to maintain some sense of identity, because they were neither Israelis nor Indian, so they became British, right, in the middle of the desert. And I thought this would be an interesting metaphor. And then I did this vast research. I wrote this with two really interesting women, one who kind of represented the Moroccans and one who kind of represented the Indians. And the three of us wrote it together. And I really did not think it would be so successful. And when the movie came out, I mean, we are an immigrant nation. And it really struck a chord with every Israeli, you know, I mean, every Israeli has parents or grandparents, you know, who came from somewhere. And the audience was comprised of whole families. This was like a, you know, I mean, 8 people would come in and watch this. And it became like kind of a national catharsis, you know. I mean, people really, you know, older people opening up to younger people and this kind of a thing.
It's fascinating, because if you were basing it on just the Indian-Israeli community, you would have a very small community there to come see the movie. And somehow that small story managed to resonate really beyond, and even beyond, not all of it. This is the other Israel. These are the Israelis who are not part of the mainstream. And that managed to resonate to the majority, which is just a fascinating
well, to this day, you know, I mean, we got the Russian immigrants and we got the Ethiopian immigrants, and immigrants are always the outsiders. And immigrants, you know, we got your Russian PhD who's cleaning the floor in the building where I live, you know, and you got, it's just the reality of an immigrant nation. And interestingly enough, this movie opened up this whole big discussion about Mizrahi and Ashkenazi and how these people were driven, you know, to live in those cities that nobody wanted to live in.
How does it play for you now? How many years later are we? We're about 15 years later or so. How do you look back at this period as far as from your perspective of making this film? Is it something you would want to remake differently? Is there something that you would take from this film, from this perspective now that you feel, oh, I'm now in a different place with all of this material?
Well, I have this attitude, once I make a movie, once I'm done with it, it's no longer mine. it belongs to the culture, it belongs to the country, it belongs to you. And Israelis seem to have embraced it. And in Israel, there's a surefire, there's a way of knowing when does a movie become a classic, and when it gets shown on Independence Day. Independence Day, the programmation is Salah Shabbati, and Halakha, and all these movies, which are Israeli classics. And about 5 years ago, this one made the grade, And once a movie becomes one, it's the equivalent in America of It's a Wonderful Life and the kind of stuff that gets played on Christmas, So Israelis have really embraced this movie, and much to my delight, and people still refer back to it. And people are leaning heavily on me to make a sequel, but I will not.
There goes my last question. Folks, we have up in this room, next up is Rage and Glory, which is another one of Avi's classics. How many people here have seen it? If anybody? No. Well, there are still tickets, and you're welcome to stay for it. We have time for one question. If somebody has a desperate question, I see a hand up in the back, so we're going to pass the microphone up to you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the casting, how you selected the actresses?
Well, the casting it took me almost a year to put together this cast. These two girls, neither one of them acted in a movie before. Were very, very young, very inexperienced, and really wonderful. Both became big stars in Israel after the movie opened. We went to Bollywood to cast the two Indian actors, and we went to France to cast, the neighbor and the husband, and we shot this movie just as the second Iraq Desert Storm broke out, and we shot not far from the Israeli nuclear reactor, and because the Iraqis are not very good shots, we figured they would shoot at the reactor and hit us. So, and we had the first day of shooting was really bizarre because everybody was walking on the set with gas masks, every single person. And there was something really beautiful about people. I mean, we had a meeting before we started shooting, should we make this movie or not? Because there was a war and there was a danger that the Iraqis would shoot our direction. And we had Indian actors, we had French actors, we had some English people, we had some American, Israelis, people of all nationalities, and we all decided that the only answer one can give to a war, which might be pointless or not, is to create art. And we decided to make the movie. And we were really, really terrified for the first 3 days, and then the war was over. Mm-hmm.
They heard you were making the movie. They said, well, we're going to step back.
They were wise to do so.
Before we close out, first of all, I want to say, if you haven't seen all of Avi Nesher's collection, it's worth looking into it a little more. And again, some of the films are on our streaming site on israelfilmcenter.org. The other element that I wanted to mention is on the back of your tickets. I wanted to thank our sponsors, Miznon, who you can get during the festival. If you come in with your ticket, a free drink with whatever meal there on 72nd Street. It's a fabulous restaurant. Finally, I wanted to mention, join us tomorrow night is our Tikkun Shavuot here. From 10 p.m. on, we're going to be celebrating Israeli television, showing new shows and discussing Israeli TV. Some of Israeli TV is really the biggest hits coming out of Israel. So we'll talk about that side of the industry, and that's going to be here tomorrow night from 10 a.m. till like 4 in the morning. So stay the night. Avi, I want to thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Rage and Glory. So that'll be starting in a few minutes. If you have tickets for both, you're welcome to stay.
Everyone, you're welcome to exit from the top, from L1, or from this door right over here.